that I purchased this one.
I didn't want to do this, but I'm going to make time today. I'm JJTP, a lawyer, not your lawyer. Let's talk about the 13th Amendment and why slavery is still allowed in this country. And by this country, I mean the United States of America. Most people believe that the 13th Amendment bans slavery in the United States of America, but that's not so. Let's take a look at what the 13th Amendment actually says. Pause to read. The important part to note there is the part that says, except for a crime where a person has been duly convicted. And that's the key. There are people today in America, 2022, picking cotton in a field for little or no pay, i.e. slaves. How did we get here? Well, in 1865, when the 13th Amendment was passed, the southern states had to find another way to keep the people working. So they passed black codes, which outlawed things like vagrancy or not having a job, i.e. all the people who were just freed since they were no longer working as slaves. These laws prohibited black people from doing things like owning property or congregating together or not having a job. So if you don't have a job, you're guilty of not having a job, and therefore you're convicted, and then you can go back to being a slave. But this wasn't their grandfather's slavery. This was actually worse, because now they had what they called convict leasing. The state would lease these people out to private businesses to work for little or no money. See, their grandfathers actually own their slaves, and because you own something, you take better care of it. But when you're only leasing it and it's not yours, you don't care what happens to it. And by it, I mean human beings. These convicts had a mortality rate of 16 to 25%. Under the convict leasing scheme, more people died than under actual slavery. By the late 1800s, southern states were getting up to 70% of their revenue from this convict leasing. Hence why they're so used to low taxes today. One of the most famous prison camps was the James Prison Camp, which now is the Louisiana State Penitentiary, or you may know it by its other name, Angola. It was named Angola for the home country of the slaves that worked on that plantation before the Civil War. After the plantation owner died, the land was sold and then leased to the state of Louisiana to house their convicts in exchange for a part of the profit that they were making from the convicts' work. While the state of Louisiana banned convict leasing in 1898, not much changed for the people working there. Today, Angola is still a working farm with over 5,000 people working there, 75% of whom are black and 74% of whom have life sentences. In fact, if you've seen the Eddie Murphy, Martin Lawrence film, Life, you know what I'm talking about.
We don't need no education, says a young man sitting in class. School was out, 3 o'clock on the dot. He had beef with some kids and he got shot.
Angola is the largest and one of the oldest prisons in the United States. There are roughly 1.2 million people in prison in the United States today who can be legally still enslaved. In fact, when people are in prison, they often work for very low wages, 14 cents per hour on average. And in 5 southern states, guess what? There's no wages at all. You work for free. Also, like slavery of old, there are house prisoners, i.e. people who work in administration, and field prisoners, i.e. people who work out in the fields. Also, like antebellum slavery, what happens if you refuse to work? Well, you're put in solitary confinement, i.e. the box, or you're denied calls and visitation, i.e. separated from your family. All this is to say, slavery is not as gone as you think it is. In fact, in Texas, they still make people pick cotton at a loss to the state, just because. Is this modern day slavery, or does the punishment fit the crime? Let me know what you think. Stand by for part 2, where I tell you about a judge who was sentenced to prison because he sentenced so many people to prison just to make money off of it. Like, share, and follow.